journey together. So before I start, as I do, um, I discuss some feedback that I've gotten over the week, and I have to share that one of the learners, one of the participants in the Shaar, has shared with me something quite nice. Without going into details, usually we can, and I like going into details. At this time, um, one of the learners was struggling with a certain issue, and were quite upset because they felt like it was nonsense, but it was disturbing at the same time. And trying to work out the actual feelings together with the nonsense and going back and forth. And that person told me when they felt that okay, they're going to get over it and they're going to manage. Somebody sent them some video from some rabbi, and they just went in the middle. I guess some of us don't have time and whatever to go through the whole thing, and they just slugged in the middle at a certain stage. And literally, the rabbi was speaking exactly about their point, exactly about their thing they were struggling with. And as the rabbi said, at the time over there, he says, sometimes Hashem sends you an nisayon in a certain area, which actually suited that person exactly. So we see many times that a person can get siyata dishmaya exactly when he needs it from Hashem, and it will give him koyach. It's just like we see consistently in the Shaar that a person's got to do his ishtadlus, and then it will be followed up from there. Same thing, if a person needs that chizuk, needs that point, it's exactly what we saw last week, that Hashem, not only that he cares and he wants, he also knows exactly what the right thing is for us, and he monitors it, and he makes sure that we have what we need in the right thing. Just what comes to mind, I saw in the Sefer, an historical story, but a certain community, I'm scared to quote because I'm almost sure. So I think, not almost sure about the story, almost sure about the person. If I remember correctly, it was Reb Chaim Mibrisk. I'm not sure. I'm really not sure. But I saw in the Sefer interesting incident he had in the shul over there, that those days, it was a time, the beginning of the Haskalah movement, and it was a lot of discussion between the communities, to the degree that they've decided, the Rabbanim, that nothing will be changed from the Masoret. And we know very strongly that the one thing that keeps us going for years is our tradition. Because if we don't keep to our tradition, we don't keep to the passage of Torah throughout the generation, then we can get lost. Because once Torah is up for interpretation, then anybody can do what they want when they want. So they were extremely strict those days. And the rabbi was there, and there was one community. There was one community that the Gaboim, whatever, and decided that they're going to have a choir in the shul, which, okay. However, going with Hasan, however, they put them like they were doing at the Reforms time. They made like steps up to the Ezras Noshim, like a whole platform for the choir to stand there. And the Rav comes in, and said, I think it was Reb Chaim, not sure. He comes in and he says, Rabbi said, what is this? Go down. We don't change from the Masorah, so the Masorah is not to have this choir. And the head of the Gabayim says, go back up. So they go back up. And the rabbi says, go down. So they go down. And the Gabbai says, no, you must go back up. And they go back up. And back and forth. And the rabbi is saying, get down. And the Gabbai is going, go back up. And he writes in the Sefer that he thought to himself, okay, that's it. It's the last time. I'm not going to make a joke out of the Torah, and I can't do this anymore. And it is what it is. And he tells them, guys, get down. And they get down. And the Gabbai says, get back up. And they start going up. And as soon as that happens, somebody from the Ezras Noshim, I guess it's been for years that we listen to our wives more than other people, and somebody from the Ezras Noshim shouts, Shegetz, what are you doing? Why are you going against the rabbi? And everybody stay downstairs. And the rabbi said, obviously, the moment he gave up, which means the moment he decided that that's the end of his ishtadlus, that's when it was sorted out. Which means that it teaches a very strong lesson. Sometimes we're going to work harder just because we put in extra ishtadlus. Because if we see clearly, and we've seen throughout the Shurim, that Hashem sometimes gives us something only when we've done our ishtadlus. So we've done our ishtadlus as much as we can. Eventually we're like, okay, we've done what we can. Hashem will sort it out. So if you give up in a much later stage, then you're actually working harder and harder and harder, but you're not gaining anything because you're only getting it later after you're more tired, because at the end of the day, you're going to get it at the end of your hishtadlus. Now, I'm not saying because of that don't do hishtadlus, but once a person has done normal hishtadlus, a person has worked what he can, he's done the project how he believes, he's done the maximum that he thinks is appropriate, then pushing more is just pushing for no reason. And that's a lot of what we saw. There is the time of when things are supposed to come. That's just as a side part, things that are left over from last week's year. The Akdama Chamishis is what we're going to be looking at in today. And says the Chovos Halevavos, there are two ways that people can get stuff from Shamayim. And these are the two ways that we achieve things, and we're going to see the differences in how it works. He says, one way, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is goizer that this person will get what he needs, which means a person gets rich by mistake. What is by mistake? Even if it wasn't by mistake, he won the lottery. Most people that you would buy a lottery ticket, I'm assuming, not that I know personally, and they'll win the lottery, they'll feel very strongly that it was a present from Hashem. I don't imagine somebody who would win the big prize of the lottery out of millions of people will say, oh, and again, here's proof there's no God, it's just about winning the statistics. Most people will realize that it's not a normal thing. It's not the standard. It's not the way to achieve. Or suddenly something happened without working on it. Business deals are you work and work and work and work. And one day this guy goes somewhere and somebody tells him, oh, by the way, do you know somebody's looking to sell a house? And the other guy says, I don't know. And on the way home, his other friend tells him, I'm looking to buy a house. And he makes the shidduch and he makes 5% of the house. It's hard for a person to say, well, no, I made an amazing parnosa, ishtadlus. It's too clear that it's just a gift from Shamayim. Some people need a bit more extreme to feel that it's a gift from Shamayim. Sometimes a person gets it less than an extreme, a Yerusha. But again, it's money that a person didn't do any ishtadlus for. Although I'm sure if you ask my kids, they'll tell you that being my son is a big ishtadlus and it's hard work. But although I don't know how financially they'll make out of it, so whatever, not a big ishtadlus. But anyways, the concept is Yerusha. If somebody gets a Yerusha, he didn't work for the money. So that's one path of way that Hashem gives us parnasa without working for it. It just happens. Happens to be that you found something. Sometimes it's not such an extreme. Happens to be that you got an extra 5 calls in business and it worked, and it wasn't necessarily your plan. That's one way. And the other way is that Hashem created in nature ways that if you do this ishtadlus, you will make money. You will make parnasa. And when I say money, I mean food, drink, a person's needs, not necessarily a person's, not necessarily money. Right? There's a famous. Sorry about that. Call came in. There's a famous Rebbe in America who's a badchan in weddings, half comedian, and he always says that he doesn't need money at all. He comes to performs, he speaks in places, he doesn't come for money. And all the money he gets, he doesn't keep a penny. He says, I give it out to people that need. I give it to the butcher, to the makolet, to the bank, to the car agency. I give out, I don't keep the money by me. Which means we see that a person doesn't need, and that's what I'm going to discuss in the share. I'm not going to talk about needing money for money. It's about needing money for needs. So Hashem made that if somebody goes to the well and he puts a bucket down and he pulls it back up, he'll have water. It's not necessarily the same ishtadlus as winning the lottery. It's not necessarily the same ishtadlus as the same present from Hashem. There is another way, and that's what he says. There's another path. A person works and he makes money. So yes, not every business is guaranteed that it will work. However, there are things that are guaranteed, and we'll see later on. For instance, if somebody eats food, he's not hungry anymore. His ishtadlus was to eat, and now he's okay. He doesn't need to eat more. So what? So that's a ishtadlus. There is is a path of ishtadlus that if a person does the natural way that Hashem created in the world, he fulfills it, it will work. And for that, there's no concern. Okay, so we have this, and so we have this path, and we have that path. Okay, so as he says, the one is acharei etzira, that it just happens. Hasheni sibot umatzaim matzuim em koivim urechoikim. Okay, so now we have to understand that every person has that ability to achieve both of them from Shammai. Now, so we'll come one and say, well, if that's the case, then I'm just going to go on the lottery path. I think that suits me a bit better than other hardworking areas. A person can't do that because that's number one. A person is obligated to work. A person does have this obligation to. 1 second. Okay, so a person does have this obligation to do the ishtadlus because, as we saw just a couple of weeks ago in the parsha, you got to work, you got to do your ishtadlus. Fine, so you got to do your ishtadlus. So you can't say, I'm not going to do any ishtadlus. Specifically, that we do see clearly that even somebody who has all his finances from Hashem in the present still needs to do ishtadlus. Because even if you have a lot of money, you still need to go buy bread. And even if you have bread in your living room because somebody put it there, you still need to wash your hands and eat it. You need to sit down, eat like a man, pick it up, put it in your mouth. There's always some kind of process of hishtadlus. Okay, the question is how far we go with it. So now we have to see the differences. We have to see the differences between where a person could rely on Hashem and connect Hashem in the level of just getting, as we said, as a Yetzira, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu decided this person will be rich, this person will be financially stable, will have what he needs, and it could be winning the lottery, Yerusha, or whatever it is, and where a person needs to actually do his ishtadlus. Okay, but it's very clear. A person has to know that regardless of which path he is and what parts of the path he's on, everything comes from Hashem. Regardless, a person is in a situation that he's getting his needs, his basic needs are coming from Hashem. And Hashem is looking after him and making sure that he has what he needs. Okay, so let's start and see the minimum ishtadlus. So we said that there's the both paths, and we all have both of them. Anybody could look back and say, well, I had a situation that I got a good business deal. I don't know why, it just, Hashem sent it to me. When I was young, I went out with friends and they decided to pay, and it was a surprise for me. Not saying that a person needs to think of a time that he got 1,000,000 rands. Could be he got 25 rands. He went out with his friend and his friend decided to pay for the drinks. And his friend decided to make sure he has what he needs. But we all had these times. We go to his shul and there's a kiddush there. We get our needs without putting effort in it. Okay? We're going to eat by somebody for Shabbos, whatever it is. However, there will always have to be a minimum hishtadlus that a person is obligated to do. Always. Even if you're in a situation that somebody's giving you your food, you still need to, as I said, pick it up, put it in your mouth. Sometimes you don't have that combination of somebody else taking care of you, present from Hashem, and the ishtadlus of eating. So you need a bit more. You need to take your credit card and go to the shops and buy food. Rabbi Bechaya doesn't really speak about the credit card. He more speaks about you'll have to go and take the wheat and grind it and bake it and make bread out of it. But the concept is, the further we go, there's more work a person must put into the ishtadlus, must put into the obligation of getting his needs. He says it could be harder. It could be that a person, not only that he needs to take the flour and make bread out of it and bake it and whole thing. Sometimes it's up to a level that sometimes it's even in a point that he needs to uh, um, work hard to get the money for it, which is another step removed, right? Sometimes a person is struggling even more, and he doesn't have the money. He doesn't work, and even when he goes to work, he doesn't have the money, so he needs to sell his own appliances to get that money. These are all levels of ways that Hashem put in the world that if you do it, you will have your needs. If you work, you'll get money. You'll be able to buy food. If you don't have the job, you don't have that. If you have belongings, you could sell them and get stuff. So a person will have to always do something of ishtadlus in order to have his needs. The big question is how much of it will he have to do? Will he have to go as far as selling his belongings and getting money and buying flour and or wheat and grinding or whatever it is, or he can go to work and have money and buy food, or for somehow he'll win the lottery and he'll have money to buy food, or his friend will invite him for a meal. Whatever it is, there is going to be something along those lines that a person needs to do hishtadlus. Right? So we see that. And by the way, I believe that it has to do with it that a person we know that a person once at any age has to start connected, has to start to do the way the world works in the ishtadlus. Even a child reaches chinuch, a child reaches obligation. There's different levels in life. I believe also in ishtadlus there's a certain level like that. And when a baby is born and a baby has um, zero obligations, if a baby has zero obligations, then many times you'll see that the mother has a understanding, a natural feeling when her baby is hungry. If you see a baby that's a month old or 2 months old, the mom will say, "Oh, baby hasn't woken up, but I know I need to go feed him," because at that point the baby is completely potter from ishtadlus, completely doesn't even need to cry in order to get what he wants, she wants, completely potter. As time goes, even a baby needs to start eating food and needs to start working and needs to start getting it. So there is that level of ishtadlus, and a child, when he's younger, he doesn't have the obligation to get the food, just to eat it. Then a later stage, sometimes he'll have to prepare it, and later stage, someone will have to go. And only when he becomes an adult, he has to actually get the money, the finances, and take care of it. But there is that level of the hishtadlus. Okay. So now, what we need to look into is why. Why, be'etzem, if there is this ishtadlus, right? If we say that a person, um, even when he has all his needs, all his food in front of him, he has to do some work, some ishtadlus, pick up the food and eat it. Why did Hashem really create the world in a way that a person has to work so hard for parnasa? Why is it? We know parnasa is a challenge. Parnasa is hard work. Parnasa is uh, um, sometimes it's working hard to get it. Sometimes it's having it and worrying about it. Sometimes, but it's a challenge. Why? What's the reason Hashem created the world in that way? Why do we need to work? So he says Chovos Halevavos, and he says 2 points. Maybe we'll see. We'll try to go through them today properly. Okay. Okay. So the first one. So the first one is that Hakadosh Baruch Hu. So the first one is like this. He says the first reason that Hakadosh Baruch Hu put us through it, just debating which route to take with this. The first one he says that Hakadosh Baruch Hu puts us in the world in order to check, to challenge us, to see what is our way in life and our connection to Hashem? Which means like this: when we're brought into this world, Hashem brought us here in order to serve Hashem and in order to get obviously Shaar for it, which we'll see later on the Chovos Halevavos how it works. But at this point, we know that really the whole reason of creation is because Hashem wants to do good things for us. But to get everything as a charity is embarrassing. So what Hashem does is Hashem makes us work for it. And we feel more comfortable with it. If a person gets money by charity, he feels very uncomfortable. If a person works for his money, even though maybe it's half charity, maybe Hashem gives him more than what he deserves, but he feels more comfortable. He enjoys it. So Hashem brought us for that reason to the world. So what did Hashem do? Hashem gave us a set of rules of how to achieve our parnasa. Hashem put us in a world that we need to work hard and and it's a challenge for us, our parnasa. And many times a person is questioning his obligation for parnasa versus his obligation to serve Hashem properly. Hashem is a person is saying, okay, I need to do my parnasa because I need to work. I need to get what I need. Therefore, I may, I'm not going to lie. But if they don't ask, I'm not going to say. Or all kinds of things like that. There was a Shiva in Kfar Chassidim. It's an amazing thing. Shiva Stechemet, who Rabbi Dushnitzel, just to understand, he had, I'm talking about 60, 70 years ago, and Rabbi Shalom writes a story, he remembers it. He had a field. He was a mashgiach in the yeshiva, and he got a present from someone, and he owned a field. And he was struggling. He wasn't working with it. He was learning, and he was struggling to keep it. It was just costing him money, and he couldn't manage the finances of it. So he was trying to sell it strongly, and he didn't manage. And he kept on going to people, and he asked the boys in the yeshiva, "Please help me, daven for me, that I'll sell this field." And eventually, one of the Talmidim comes to him one day after a year or whatever, and he says, "Rabbi, I found somebody who wants to buy a field, and he lives overseas, but he wants to do it's for him. He's a big Zionist, and for him to invest in Eretz Yisrael and in agriculture, the big thing he wants to buy." So Dushnitzer was very excited. He said, "Okay, let's go." And he goes, he meets the guy in Yerushalayim, and he says, "I want you to come see the field." And this Talmud says he was about to lose his mind. The whole way from Yerushalayim to the field, a couple hours, the mashgiach kept on telling him, "I just need you to know that if you look in the field, you'll see that in the second row, the third tree is completely rotten. So really, you're not going to get anything. It looks fine, but I'm telling you that under it's a problem. So you're going to have to restructure it." And he tells them, and down there's a lot of stones. So when you try to plow it, it's going to be a problem. And he's like literally convincing him the whole way not to buy it. And as soon as they get to the field, he tells the guy, "Oh, remember what I told you? But it's not like seeing. Look under this tree, there's a problem. Look over there." And this Talmud is really losing it. He says, if you don't want to sell, don't sell. But why are you doing this? And eventually, the guy says, "Okay, 1 second, I just need to drink something." And he takes out some medication and he swallows a pill. And Rav Dushnitzer says, "What's that?" And he said, "Oh, I have a history." He says he has a history of heart condition, so he just needs to take his medication. So Rav Dushnitzer says, No, I'm not selling for you. He says, if somebody wants that, it's a headache, it's a pain, you're not going to manage, I'm not selling. I don't want to risk your health. And he was going on about that if somebody, the Gemara says, if somebody wants to lose his money, he should hire workers and not monitor the work. So he said, I'm not selling, and they went back to Yerushalayim. Because he says, you're just going to lose all your money because you're going to hire them, you're not going to monitor them, and you have a heart condition, I'm not selling. And they went back. And the Talmud was devastated. So he goes to Rav Dushnitzer afterwards and he says, I don't know, Rabbi, you don't want to sell? And he says, no, definitely, I desperately need to sell. So he said, wow, so what was this all about? And he said, it's not worth it for me to sell, and it's not going to be a good sale if there's a chashash, if there's a concern that I was over of lifnei iver letitan michshay. Says my discussion with Hashem, my obligation to be honest, overcomes any need I have. And I felt that it's as my obligation, halachically, to be honest, this is what I need to do. Up to the degree that a bit later he was stressed about it. This whole story is brought down by Rabbi Shvadron. Rabbi writes that one day he's going out. He meets Rav Dushnitzer, and Rav Dushnitzer tells him, "Do me a favor, speak to so and so. He's a menayel of a cheder, and ask him if he could ask the talmidim to daven that I'll be able to sell because I really need to sell." And he said, "Okay, I could mention to him, but." He says, no, but gently, because I asked him a few days ago, but I think he forgot. So Shalom says that he asked him, why does the Rav think he forgot? Maybe the Arab is saying to him that he'll sell. And Avnushnitzer said, because I would have sold already. Simple. If I asked kids to daven, and they would have davened, I would have sold. Must be that he forgot. As simple as that. And Shalom says that as soon as he saw that, he went to this guy and he said, maybe. And the guy says, that's true, I forgot, I'm sorry. And he went and he met Tehillim, and they actually sold it. And eventually later on, they sold it and he was very happy, whatever the story ended up and what it was. However, the concept here, he comes, and Rav Dushnitzer says, and this is what the Chovos Halevavos is talking about. Talking about the concept that HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts us in the world and he gives us many physical needs, that not only that we have these physical needs, and it's not only about food, it's about clothes, it's about housing, it's about cutlery, it's about other emotional stuff, whatever we need. And he challenges us to see if we're going to overrule our work and ishtadlus over our obligations to Hashem. And when we have that challenge, and a person is strong and he says, well, my ishtadlus is to work every moment I can, but not instead of my hour of learning, or not instead of my going to daven, not instead of my honesty, not instead about me being careful with somebody else's money. If that's the case, then I'm doing what I can. Because if that's the case, I'm doing what I can, and I'm not choishesh, right? So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu puts that need to a person, and he makes him work hard for it. According to that, he says something very interesting. This is only applicable to a person's needs. It's not necessarily applicable to somebody's luxury. Because many times, a person would feel stressed to manage financially for his needs, but luxury, it will be easier to deal with, in a way. Okay? Therefore, comes and he says that this is why we have these two sides of ishtadlus. What a person needs, he has to work hard for. He has to work hard to see that he'll really choose to do what Hashem wants and not to do any ishtadlus over that. Once he's done his ishtadlus properly for what Hashem wants, and he filled up his time with work without it taking away from his Yiddishkeit, from his growth, from his learning, from his honesty, all of that. Once he's done that properly, then afterwards, he'll get it the other way. The rest of the money, he'll get in a much calmer way. Many times we could see, people will tell you, in business, I worked so hard to make the first million, or I worked so hard in the beginning, and eventually the business took off. What does it mean the business took off? A lot of times, a person works, and he works very hard in order to fulfill his basic needs. And once he reaches over the ishtadlus of the nisayon, of knowing that he'll do the right thing, then it picks up. Then it can get easier even. Then it could be sometimes he'll make money in as the way Hashem does, with a surprise, with a present. And they say, My father always used to say he's working now on his second million because the first one didn't work out. And everybody says that the second one is much easier. So he's working on his second. So that concept of a person, on the one hand, working hard, investing, trying his best, and keeping it within order. And then afterwards, once it's clear that this person chose the good or the bad, by the way. It could be that he chose the bad, but anyways, the test is over. Anyways, the big question for this guy, he eventually got to a deciding point. Then it could get easier. Then it will pick up. It will pick up. That's one shot. The second shot, he says, why did Hashem do it in this way? That a person has to work so hard for his parnasa. Because unfortunately, when we're bored, we get into trouble. That's the reality. If a person doesn't have any financial worries and he has all day long to do I don't know what, then he could start putting his money into nonsense. He could start putting his money in, he could start wasting time. He could start doing things he shouldn't be doing, watching things he shouldn't be watching, because he has the time. Sometimes Hashem gives us a present to keep us busy for parnasa, and we think it's a struggle. But really, it's our biggest protection to stay on path. It's our biggest protection to stay connected to Hashem and to stay doing the right thing. First of all, connected to Hashem, because the more you need, the more close to Hashem you feel. If a person is in need and he knows where it comes from, he feels that connection. He feels that need of being close to Hashem. But on the other hand, it's also just the concept. If a person is chasing his parnasa, he doesn't have the time to get into trouble. He doesn't have the time to do things that he shouldn't be doing. And that's the second reason that HaKadosh Baruch Hu did two ways of parnasa. Okay, and Chazal said, we see it in the Torah many psukim. He brings here one, Vayishman Yeshurun Vayivat Shomanta Visok V'Sisa Vayito Shelokau Seyu. Am Yisrael got rich, got comfortable, and they started neglecting Hashem. Why? Because they're bored. They're doing things because they have the time and they have the finances. More than that, Yofet Talmud Torah Derech Eretz, Sheyigia Shnei Mashkach HaSavoin, Torah with Derech Eretz, which is Parnasa, right? You get doing it together. If a person is invested in Torah, Yirah Shamayim, and hard work, Mashkach HaSavoin, you forget about doing an Avera. You don't have time to do an Avera. You forget about it. You're busy. You don't have time for it. Somebody told me here, here, when he was growing up in Israel, he was a yeshiva bachar, and he got into nonsense a bit. And his father was a tremendous Talmid Chacham. And he told me that the big shock he had is, he says, one time he was sitting at home in his room, thinking his father doesn't know, with a few friends, and he was watching a movie. And his father walks in, a big Talmid Chacham, and he sees his son, his 15-year-old, watching a movie. And he told me that that was the reaction his father gave him is with him until today. He said, my father didn't get mad. He said, my father looked at me shocked. And he said, where do you have time? Isn't it a waste of time for you? Don't you feel like you're wasting your time? Who has 2 hours to just sit and do nothing and just watch a story? Who has that? It's a waste of time. He was like shocked. His father was shocked by the concept of how can you waste so much time? And we know it. We know that when we work hard, a person doesn't have time. And a person is doing what he's obligated to do in order to survive. Therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu deliberately kept us busy. Hashem kept us busy. If we think about it, we do it to our kids all the time. Comes holidays, right? And we say, oh, what are we going to do with the kids? There's no school, or COVID, there's no school, or whatever it is. What's the ultimate thing? We got to keep them busy. We got to keep them busy. Half the time we tell them, clean this, pick up this, do that, do this. Especially in South Africa, when we have many times help. But we don't want the kids to be bored. And the kids are not happy when they're bored. So Hashem, actually within the chasing of the parnasa, he is actually giving us the answer to boredom. He's actually giving us the way to be closer to Hashem. He's actually giving us the ability to not slip. Okay? Therefore, this is exactly the special path that a person can get. Now, in a way, it's up to us. Because the more we need that distraction, the more Hashem will maybe challenge us to work hard. So if a person doesn't need it, then Hashem's not going to extra make him work hard, because he's not going to choose Averas. He's not going to choose in wasting time. Or the other side, he's not choosing in any way. He's not choosing to the bad path, and he's not wasting time. So Hashem will say, okay, fine, you can have an easier parnasa. Right? We know that very clearly. I don't know about you guys. I know I could sit ben asmanim and be busy learning or doing something or working, and then suddenly one of my kids will come, I'm bored. Adi, I'm bored. Adi, I'm bored. I'll say, okay, is your room clean? No, but I don't want to do my room. And I'll say, no, you got to do your room. Your room has to be clean. Now, the room was dirty the same way before my child came to ask me what to do and after. But I wasn't so concerned, and I wasn't going to check the room because my son was occupied. My daughter was occupied. Fine, they're doing what they're doing. Let them enjoy. Once they come and say they're bored, go do the dishes. And my mother always used to say, if you're bored, go do the dishes. Go, I'm bored, clear off the counters. I'm bored, do something. Which means, in a way, that's a bit of that's not a bit, that's the relationship we have with Hashem. If a person lives a life that he's bored, and he's not going to invest his time in what he's supposed to, then Hashem will tell him, go get a parnasa, go work, go do something. If, by the way, if he's a person that working hard won't stop him from Averas, then maybe he will have an easier parnasa, which is sometimes why we see people that have time and have money and have this. It won't help this special shmira of keeping the person occupied. It won't help, so Hashem won't do it. But it's definitely that working hard for parnasa and struggling for parnasa is a gift. Either a gift like we saw in the one option, that it's a gift so Hashem gets us tested and gives us the opportunity to show that we are making the right decision, although we're under financial stress. We are making the right decision, although we can make a nice amount of money by just not being perfect, or by just skipping a shiur or learning, or by just not being honest a bit. Not really not honest, he didn't really mean, and he owes me from last time, or whatever it is. Or, that's option one, that Hashem gave us option two is Hashem gave us a gift, so we don't do things that are a problem with our extra time. Extra time is a disaster. And therefore Hashem says, I'm giving you a present, and I'm telling you, you got to work for your stuff. Go clean your bedroom, as I say. Go wash dishes, go work. Go make parnasa. Go do something. If we look, it's not what the Chai says, but if we look, it's very simple. Chazal tell us, Kol ha'makabel ol Torah v'derech eretz, ma'avirim meno ol derech eretz. Okay? So we say, makabel ol Torah, ma'avirim meno ol derech eretz. Why? How come if a person takes upon himself Torah, they take away the obligation of parnasa? If a person is learning Torah, and that's his oil, he's using the time fully for Torah, he's using his time fully for Yerushalayim, Hashem takes off the obligation of parnasa. So why? Because here you could say another pshat, because you don't need it. You don't need that being occupied. You don't need that time. You're like a child that will sit and learn something, or be productive, or read a book, or do something nice or creative, and their parents don't need to say, oh, do you want to clean your bedroom or do the counters or whatever, because they're keeping busy. The person is mekabel ol Torah, then he's keeping busy. He's good to go, he's fine. And the same thing with the parnasa. So we see clearly that there are two paths in parnasa, just to end off. There's the path in parnasa that a person can get gifted from Hashem, and then he'll only be left with the minimum parnasa to actually eat, or to actually get the food with his parnasa. And there's a level of actually working hard. And Hashem created in nature that if you work, you get paid. And if you get the bread, then you'll have food. But then there's two reasons why Hashem makes us work hard. And we need to understand that. Number one is to test us. Once we pass the test is over. Number one. Number two, that's what it says, that anybody who keeps the Torah from being poor, in the end will keep it from being rich. Why? Because he passed the test. Pass the test, you go out for recess, you go out for break. The teachers always told us, whoever finishes the test can go out and enjoy your free time. So that's what Hashem does for us. And the second thing is that if a person doesn't need financial struggle in order not to do averos, in order not to do something wrong or something stupid, then if a person doesn't need that, then Hashem can give him parnasa easily because he doesn't need that special protection. So it's really in our hands. If we can monitor ourselves, if we can bring us to a point that A, we've made the right decision, B, we don't